Dennis Kowalski thought he had found the deal of his life. It was a Tuesday morning in March when he saw the listing on an agricultural equipment auction site. A 2020 Massey Ferguson 7S.210. Bright red. Low hours. The odometer showed 3,200 hours, which was reasonable for a 3-year-old machine. The photos looked clean, no visible damage. The cab interior was pristine. The tires had good tread. The listing said it was coming out of Nebraska from a dealership liquidation sale. The starting bid was $95,000. Dennis had been looking for a second tractor to expand his operation, and this looked perfect. He did the math in his head. A new 7S.210 was going for $265,000. Even with 3,200 hours, this machine should have been worth at least $180,000 on the retail market. If he could get it for under $140,000, he would be stealing it. He registered for the auction and waited. The bidding started slow. A few lowball offers came in around $80,000. Dennis waited. He had set his maximum at $145,000. Anything above that and the deal stopped making sense. The price climbed steadily. It hit $100,000, then $115,000, then $125,000. Dennis placed his bid at $130,000. Someone countered at $132,000. Dennis went to $130,000. Silence. The auction timer counted down. 30 seconds. 20, 10, sold. Dennis had won the Massey Ferguson 7S.210 for $135,000. He felt a rush of satisfaction. He had just saved $30,000 compared to the market rate, maybe more. He completed the payment process, arranged for transport, and waited for the tractor to arrive at his farm in central Iowa. It took 6 days. When the flatbed trailer pulled into his yard and the driver unloaded the Massey Ferguson, Dennis walked around it slowly, inspecting every inch. It looked even better in person. The paint was flawless. The hydraulic lines were clean. The cab smelled new. He climbed inside and fired up the engine. It started immediately. Smooth idle, no smoke. The transmission shifted perfectly. He drove it around the yard, testing the steering, the brakes, the 3-point hitch. Everything worked. Dennis felt vindicated. This was a good machine. This was a smart purchase. For the first 2 months, the Massey Ferguson performed exactly as expected. Dennis used it for spring planting. He pulled a 12-row planter through 320 acres without a single issue. The CVT transmission was smooth. The hydraulics were responsive. The fuel efficiency was better than his older John Deere. He told his neighbor Carl about the deal he had gotten. Carl raised his eyebrows and said he hoped it worked out. Dennis asked what he meant. Carl said nothing, just that out-of-state auction tractors sometimes had stories. Dennis dismissed it. The machine was running perfectly. There was no story. It was just a good deal that other people had been too cautious to take. Dennis felt smarter than the competition. That feeling lasted until early June. The hydraulics failed on a Wednesday morning. Dennis was pulling a field cultivator through a 160-acre section when the 3-point hitch dropped without warning. The cultivator hit the ground hard. Dennis stopped the tractor immediately. He tried to raise the hitch. Nothing. No response. He checked the hydraulic fluid level. Full. He checked for leaks. Nothing visible. He tried the remote cylinders. Dead. The entire hydraulic system had gone offline. Dennis sat in the cab for 10 minutes, troubleshooting, checking every switch and dial. Nothing worked. He called a tow service and had the Massey Ferguson transported back to his farm. Then he called the local co-op service center. It was called Heartland Ag Services, and it had been servicing his equipment for 20 years. He knew the service manager personally, a guy named Tom Reichert. Tom had worked on every piece of machinery Dennis owned. If anyone could diagnose the problem, it was Tom. Dennis drove the Massey Ferguson into the service bay the next morning. Tom walked out to meet him. He looked at the tractor. He asked for the serial number. Dennis gave it to him. Tom pulled out his phone and typed the number into some kind of database. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he looked up at Dennis and said he couldn't service the machine. Dennis thought he was joking. He asked why. Tom said he just couldn't. Dennis asked if it was a parts availability issue. Tom said no. Dennis asked if it was a technician availability issue. Tom said no. Dennis asked what the problem was. Tom looked uncomfortable. He said he couldn't explain it. but the tractor was flagged in their system, and company policy was not to accept it for service. Dennis felt his chest tighten. He asked what flagged meant. Tom said he wasn't authorized to discuss it. He said Dennis should try another shop. Then Tom walked back into the service office and closed the door. Dennis stood in the service bay for 5 minutes, staring at the Massey Ferguson, trying to understand what had just happened. He had known Tom for 2 decades. They had a good relationship. They had never had a problem. And now Tom was refusing to work on his tractor without explanation. It didn't make sense. Dennis pulled out his phone and called another service center 15 miles south, a place called Tri-County Equipment Repair. He explained the situation. The receptionist asked for the serial number. Dennis gave it to her. She put him on hold. 2 minutes later, she came back and said they couldn't take the job. Dennis asked why. She said the machine was listed as ineligible for service in their network database. Dennis asked what that meant. She said she didn't have more information, but the tractor was flagged and they couldn't accept it. She apologized and hung up. Dennis felt a spike of panic. He called a third shop, same response. He called a fourth, same response. Every single service center in a 50-mile radius recognized the serial number and refused to work on the tractor. Dennis drove home and sat at his kitchen table, staring at the Massey Ferguson through the window. It was parked in his yard, red and gleaming and completely useless. The hydraulics were dead. No one would fix it. He had paid $135,000 for a machine that every mechanic in the region had blacklisted, and no one would tell him why. He opened his laptop and started searching. He typed the serial number into Google. Nothing. He searched Massey Ferguson forums. Nothing. He searched agricultural equipment recall databases. Nothing. The tractor didn't officially exist as a problem unit, but every service network in Iowa knew to avoid it. That meant the information was being shared privately, off the record, through internal systems that regular buyers never saw. Dennis realized he had walked into something that had been deliberately hidden from him. The auction listing had been clean, no warnings, no disclosures, just a tractor with low hours and a good price. And now he was stuck with it. He called the dealership in Nebraska where the auction had originated. A woman answered. Dennis explained the situation. He said he had bought the Massey Ferguson, it had failed, and no one would service it. He asked if they knew why. The woman said she would transfer him to the sales manager. The sales manager picked up. Dennis repeated the story. The sales manager said the tractor had been sold as is with no warranty. Dennis said he understood that, but he wanted to know the machine's history. The sales manager said they didn't disclose prior ownership details. Dennis asked if the tractor had been flagged for service issues. The sales manager paused. Then he said the dealership had accepted the machine on trade and sold it at auction in good faith. He said if Dennis had questions about the service history, he would need to contact the original owner. Dennis asked for the original owner's contact information. The sales manager said they couldn't release that due to privacy policies. Then he hung up. Dennis sat at the table, phone in hand, realizing he had been sold a poisoned asset, and everyone involved knew it except him. He decided to hire someone. If the system was keeping information from him, he needed someone who could get past the system. He called a private investigator in Des Moines who specialized in agricultural fraud, a guy named Martin Chase. Martin charged $150 an hour, and he said he could trace the ownership history of any piece of equipment if given enough time. Dennis sent him the serial number, the VIN, and every document he had from the auction. Martin said he would call back in a week. Dennis waited. The Massey Ferguson sat in his yard, immobile, a 210 horsepower paperweight. Dennis kept farming with his older equipment, but the work was slower. He had bought the Massey Ferguson specifically to increase his capacity, and now it was doing nothing except costing him money he didn't have. Martin called back 6 days later. He said he had traced the ownership. The Massey Ferguson had originally been sold new in May 2020 to a custom harvesting operation in western Nebraska. The operator's name was Kyle Peterson. Martin said Peterson ran a crew of 4 combines and contracted for large-scale wheat and corn operations across Nebraska, Kansas, and South Dakota. The Massey Ferguson 7SP 210 had been Peterson's primary machine. Martin said the records showed the tractor had been run extremely hard. In 18 months, Peterson had put 3,200 hours on it. That was more than double the recommended annual usage for that class of machine. Massey Ferguson recommended no more than 1,000 hours per year for optimal longevity. Peterson had run it at 1,800 hours per year. He had been pushing the machine to its mechanical limits, probably trying to maximize contract income. But that wasn't the worst part. Martin said he had found maintenance records through a parts supplier that had worked with Peterson. The records showed that Peterson had taken the tractor to an independent mechanic in North Platte and had the engine computer reprogrammed. He had increased the fuel injection timing and boost pressure to extract more horsepower from the engine. The modifications gave him an estimated 15 to 20 additional horsepower, which improved pulling capacity and fuel efficiency under load. But the modifications also voided the factory warranty and put severe stress on the drivetrain, specifically the CVT transmission. The transmission in the 7S.210 was designed to handle 210 horsepower. Peterson had tuned it to produce closer to 230. The transmission was operating outside of its rated specifications for 3,200 hours. In December 2021, the CVT failed, catastrophically. The clutch packs burned out, the transmission casing cracked. Peterson brought it to a Massey Ferguson dealer in Omaha for repair. The dealer ran diagnostics and found the engine modifications. They refused warranty coverage. The repair estimate came back at $47,000. Peterson didn't have the money. He had been running the custom operation on thin margins, and a $47,000 repair bill would have bankrupted him. So he did what a lot of operators do in that situation. He abandoned the machine. He told the dealer he couldn't afford the repair and asked them to take it on trade for whatever they could get. The dealer didn't want it. A modified tractor with a blown transmission and no warranty was a liability. But they took it anyway, probably because Peterson owed them money on other services. The dealer sat on the tractor for 3 months, trying to figure out what to do with it. Then they made a decision. They replaced the transmission. They spent the $47,000 out of pocket to make the machine operational again. But they didn't restore it to factory specifications. They installed a remanufactured CVT, not a new one. The remanufactured unit was cheaper, but it had unknown history and reduced reliability. Then they cleaned up the exterior, reset the service codes in the computer, and sent the tractor to auction. No disclosure of the modifications, no disclosure of the transmission failure, no disclosure of the remanufactured parts. Just a clean-looking 2020 Massey Ferguson with 3,200 hours sold as is, and Dennis had bought it. He had paid $135,000 for a machine with a hidden failure history, a voided warranty, and a remanufactured transmission that could fail again at any time. And every service network in the Midwest knew it. Martin explained how. When the Omaha dealer had refused warranty coverage, they had entered the serial number into an internal industry database maintained by equipment service networks. The database was called the Agricultural Equipment Service Registry, or AESR. It was a private system used by dealerships, co-ops, and independent shops to flag problem machines. If a tractor had been modified, abused, or involved in warranty disputes, the serial number got flagged. The flags weren't public. They didn't show up on Carfax-style reports. They were only visible to service providers who had access to the AESR system. The flags served as warnings. If a machine came into a shop with a flagged serial number, the service manager would know immediately that the tractor had a history. They could choose to refuse service to avoid liability. And that's exactly what had happened to Dennis. Every shop he called had checked the AESR database, seen the flag on his Massey Ferguson, and turned him away. The tractor was blacklisted, permanently. And there was no appeal process. Once a serial number was flagged, it stayed flagged. Dennis felt sick. He asked Martin if there was any way to remove the flag. Martin said no. The AESR was maintained by a private consortium. They didn't respond to individual complaints. The flags were considered internal risk management, not public record. Dennis asked if he could sue the dealer for non-disclosure. Martin said maybe, but it would cost more in legal fees than the tractor was worth, and the dealer would argue they sold it as is, with no warranty. which was technically legal. Dennis asked if he could sell the tractor. Martin said he could try, but anyone who ran the serial number would find the same flag. The resale value was essentially zero. No informed buyer would touch it. Dennis was stuck. He owned a $135,000 machine that no one would service and no one would buy. It was financial dead weight. He tried anyway. He listed the Massey Ferguson on 3 different sales platforms. He priced it at $110,000, taking a $25,000 loss just to get out. He got 2 inquiries in the first week. Both buyers asked for the serial number to run a pre-purchase inspection. Dennis gave it to them. Both buyers disappeared immediately after running the number. No follow-up. No explanation. They had seen the flag. One of them called back 3 days later, not to buy, but to warn Dennis. The buyer said he had checked with his mechanic, and the mechanic had told him the serial number was poison. The buyer said Dennis should scrap the tractor for parts and move on. Then he hung up. Dennis lowered the price to $95,000. No inquiries. He lowered it to $80,000. 1 inquiry. The guy offered $40,000, knowing Dennis was desperate. Dennis declined. He wasn't going to take a $95,000 loss. Not yet. He started calling independent mechanics, small operations that didn't use the AESR system, guys who worked out of their garages and didn't care about industry databases. He found one in a town 40 miles west, a mechanic named Ray, who said he would look at it. Dennis trailered the Massey Ferguson to Ray's shop. Ray spent 2 hours running diagnostics. He came back and said the hydraulic failure was related to a faulty solenoid in the remanufactured transmission. The solenoid wasn't OEM. It was an aftermarket part that didn't meet the same tolerances. Ray said he could replace it, but he would need to source an OEM part, and it would cost $3,800 for the part plus $1,200 for labor. Total cost, $5,000. And Ray said he couldn't guarantee the repair would last because the entire transmission was a remanufactured unit with unknown internal wear. Dennis asked how long the repair might last. Ray said 6 months, maybe a year, maybe less. It depended on how hard he ran it. Dennis paid the $5,000. Ray installed the new solenoid. The hydraulics worked again. Dennis drove the Massey Ferguson home, knowing he had just spent $5,000 on a temporary fix for a machine that was worth nothing. He used the tractor for the rest of the summer. Carefully. He didn't push it. He kept the hours low. He monitored every sound, every vibration, every hesitation in the transmission. The hydraulics held. The CVT seemed stable. But Dennis couldn't enjoy it. Every time he climbed into the cab, he felt the weight of the mistake. He had bought a machine that the entire agricultural service industry had quietly rejected. He was farming with a blacklisted tractor, and if it failed again, he would be back to square one, looking for another mechanic willing to work on a machine no one else would touch. The Massey Ferguson had become a source of stress instead of capacity. It had cost him $135,000 plus $5,000 in repairs plus countless hours of frustration. And it was worth maybe $40,000 if he could even find someone willing to take it. In October, Dennis got a call from Tom at the co-op. Tom said he had heard through the network that Dennis had gotten the tractor running again. Tom asked how. Dennis told him about Ray. Tom said that was good, but he wanted to give Dennis some advice. He said the reason shops blacklist machines isn't just liability, it's also professional reputation. If a shop works on a flagged tractor and something goes wrong, the manufacturer can refuse to support that shop on future warranty claims. It's a form of industry pressure. Shops that touch blacklisted machines risk losing their standing with the manufacturers. That's why the blacklist works. It's not just about the machine, it's about protecting the network. Tom said he respected Dennis, and he wanted him to know that the Massey Ferguson would never be accepted at Heartland Ag Services, not because Tom didn't want to help, but because the company couldn't afford to risk its relationship with Massey Ferguson corporate. Dennis thanked him and hung up. He understood now. The system wasn't designed to help buyers like him. The system was designed to protect manufacturers and dealers from liability, and machines like his Massey Ferguson were sacrificed to keep the system running. By November, Dennis had stopped using the tractor. It sat in his shed, functional but untouchable. he went back to running his older equipment. He started telling other farmers about the AESR system. Most of them had never heard of it. Some of them didn't believe him. They said equipment databases didn't work that way. Dennis showed them the documents Martin had provided. He showed them the serial number. He told them to call a service center and ask about it. A few of them did. They came back stunned. They had no idea the industry was tracking machines like that. They had no idea that buying a used tractor could mean inheriting a blacklist status that would follow the machine forever. Dennis became known locally as the guy who bought the blacklisted Massey Ferguson. It wasn't a reputation he wanted, but it was the one he had. And other farmers started asking him to check serial numbers before they bought used equipment. He always did. He didn't want anyone else to make the same mistake. In December, Dennis received a letter from a law firm in Omaha. It was a class action notice. Apparently, the dealership that had sold him the Massey Ferguson had sold 6 other modified tractors through auction in the same time period. All of them had similar histories. All of them had been flagged in the AESR system. All of them had been sold without disclosure. The law firm was building a case for fraud and non-disclosure. They were offering Dennis a chance to join the lawsuit. The potential settlement was estimated at $15,000 to $25,000 per plaintiff, minus legal fees. Dennis read the letter twice. He thought about it for a week. Then he signed the documents and mailed them back. It wouldn't make him whole. It wouldn't remove the flag from his tractor. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what had been done to him was wrong, even if the system would never change. By the end of the year, Dennis had accepted reality. He owned a Massey Ferguson 7S210 that no major service network would touch. He had a mechanic 40 miles away who would work on it for premium rates with no guarantees. He had lost at least $90,000 in value, probably more. And he had learned a lesson that most farmers never learn until it's too late. The used equipment market is not transparent. There are systems in place that buyers never see. There are flags and databases and networks that operate in the background, protecting institutions and leaving individual buyers exposed. The deal that looks too good is usually too good because someone else already knows what you don't. And by the time you find out, you own the problem and no one will help you fix it. The Massey Ferguson still sits in Dennis's shed. He still uses it occasionally when he has no other choice. But he doesn't trust it. He doesn't talk about it with pride. He doesn't show it off to neighbors. It's just a machine now. A reminder, a $140,000 lesson in how the agricultural equipment industry protects itself and how farmers like Dennis are left holding the liability when something goes wrong. The tractor runs, the hydraulics work, the CVT shifts, but the serial number is poisoned. And that poison doesn't wash off. It stays with the machine forever. And everyone in the industry knows it, except the guy who bought it at auction, thinking he had found the deal of his life.